our area authority, Elder Marion G. Romney, as we're closing the seminar, quotes from the Revelation where the Lord said, I, the Lord, will hasten my work in its time. He then said, the time is here, and the Lord is hastening his work, and he's also requiring us to hasten ours. Therefore, we are asking each of you to go back to your mission and put into operation the full program of the church. Okay. That night I sat by the fountain across the street from the hotel there in Mexico City and felt like I'd been kicked in the belly by a mule. Well, we had branch presidents, some branch presidents in our mission that could hardly write their name. And they were the smartest guy in the branch. Well, you sit there and think a little while. And by, you always end up with 1 Nephi chapter 3, verse 7, where Nephi replied to his father, I will go and do the thing the Lord has commanded, for I know the Lord gives no commandments to the children of man, save he shall prepare a way for them, that they may accomplish the thing that he has commanded them. Well, that's the bedrock on which everything rests right there. So, next thing you're doing, you're sitting there thinking, next thing you're asking yourself is just what is necessary to put into full operation the full program of the church. You don't have to be real smart to figure that one out either. The answer is leadership. Next question is, where do you get leaders? That isn't too hard to figure out either. One, you can raise them. If you have parents who are willing to have babies and who have the desire and the ability to raise them up righteously and to fill them with faith, that's one way to get leaders. Raise them. Another way to get leaders is to take what you already have and give them training so that you're making leaders out of them. You're training and teaching them to be leaders. Another way is to go out and baptize some who are already leaders. Now Brigham Young had no objection to that. When they needed a bridge builder, he'd send the missionaries out to baptize a bridge builder. Didn't bother him any. Well, I thought if Brigham Young could do it, we could do it. So then I sat down and began going through the whole thing. How are we going to do this? How? There's where we got to this matter of business tracting, we called it. Now, before that, my predecessor had instituted what they called proselyting of the rich. The missionaries would do their proselyting in the wealthy areas of the city. The problem, as I saw it, was that the people who answered the doorbell were the maids. So it turned out that we were baptizing maids and gardeners all over the city. Nothing wrong with maids and gardeners, but they need some leadership to give them direction. Therefore, we began business tracts, and this is what we did. The missionaries would go into a business establishment downtown. They would identify themselves and say, we have a message for the president or the leader of this gerente of this business. To whom should the message be addressed? And she would give them his name and title, and they would say, thank you very much. We will be back in 2 or 3 weeks to see the man, okay? So when they came back, they were expected and were very cordially received and taken into the office of the man in charge there. The first time around, guess what they gave him? They gave him the family home evening presentation and manual and told him how to use it in his own home with his own family. The next time around, guess what they gave him? The Book of Mormon, and left one with him and told him about it. Now, we didn't immediately begin to baptize a lot of leadership, but it wasn't very long until we were starting to bring them in. They baptized a dentist in Mazatlan who not only had an automobile and a telephone, he also had a yacht. The yacht didn't last very long. He never had time to use it. He usually had to use it on Sunday anyway, so he sold the yacht. Okay, I called in 2 elders and asked them to go up and open up Kaworka. And I said to them, now, I want you to do exactly what I'm telling you. The first person you contact is the mayor. And the next is the chief of police. And the next is the president of the Chamber of Commerce. And the next is the manager of the biggest bank in town. Don't talk to anyone else until you've talked to those 4 men. Now, you owe it to them as a courtesy to let them know that you have come to their city and what you're there for and how you intend to operate. You won't baptize them, but they will be very firm friends, and they were. They would really go to bat for them.
But they were walking down the street one day, and there was a couple that had conferred together, and they said, we've got all a nice home, we've got a car, we've got everything we need, except we lack something spiritual. And they prayed about it. And the missionaries are walking down the street, and they saw him. The wife said, go get it, and that's our answer to our prayer. And he said, calmate, I'll be back. They'll be back. And sure enough, they turned around, came back and knocked on their door. And they were the first converts. And they were head of the Catholic Church, really strong too,
Yeah.
but they recognized the gospel, and they were really strongly converted to the church.
The early part of my service as a mission president, I set apart a young man from Tijuana to serve as a mission under President Robert S. Wells in the mission at Monterrey, Nuevo León, Mexico. When I interviewed that young man, when he was released 2 years later, he was telling me that when he arrived in Monterrey, or in that mission, that the missionaries would say of a particular place, you can't baptize anybody over there, that's a hole, H-O-L-E. Someplace else, you can't baptize anyone over there, that's a hole. He said, President Wells said, the holes are in the heads of the missionaries. When we get rid of the holes out of the heads of the missionaries, there won't be any holes left in the mission. By the time I interviewed this young man, when he finished his mission, that had been accomplished. There were no longer any holes in the mission at Monterrey, Nuevo León. And there was no place in that mission where the missionaries were not baptizing people right and left. Therefore, that was one example of showing that whether the mission is filled with success or as a whole starts right here in the head of the missionary. Well, the missionaries have enough faith to believe the Lord, that takes care of all the holes.
A lot of our missionaries says we can't baptize in Ensenada because it's a resort town. But we sent 2 really good missionaries up there, and they were really baptizing fast. And a visitor who was down there vacationing told us, he said, wow, you sure got 2 good elders here. And that made all the world of difference. One time we were going through Mazatlan and going south.
Now through Culiacan.
Through Culiacan, going south in our mission. And my husband told the elders to turn right, and I thought, why is he telling them to turn right? That's not the way we're going to go. But we went down there, and then he said turn left, and anyway, we wandered through that little town, big town, and there were these missionaries out. They had the members with them out tracting. And we didn't know it, but one of these missionaries had been trying to get us in Hermosillo because his brother had died, and his parents wanted him to come back to the funeral. And we knew that missionaries weren't supposed to go home to the funerals, but his father wasn't active, and it was going to be a little bit ticklish, and because they really thought he should come home. And so my husband was able to explain it all to him, and I took the other missionaries aside, and I explained to them how they should treat him, that they should listen to him and let him talk about it, because that's how you should feel. My father had died, and I realized how you want to talk about things like that. And so it worked out a miracle.
I think as a mission president, I experienced more revelation and more intervention by the Lord than anything I ever did, including being a temple president or a patriarch. Now, up at Tepic, Nayarit, was a former branch president who had been released, and he had written to the office about getting a loan to start a business. And the mission secretary had written back a rather short and curt letter telling him there were no funds available for a loan of that type. And perhaps because the missionary's Spanish wasn't the very best, he had been quite offended by it, and wrote back again and said, well, if they didn't want to give him a loan, at least they could refund his tithing that he paid, and he would use that to start his business.